Heather Lockett, and this is Lasting Conversations. Sebas, otherwise known as Sebastian Peñaranda, is in the studio with us today. Hey there, Sebas.
How you doing?
I'm so happy that you're here. You have your own show, the podcast called the Sebas Perspective, and you get into social issues, some political things, what's happening in the world. You are a worldly guy, which is what is really exciting to me. You're a former military officer, and you've been around a few blocks already. So welcome.
Some blocks.
A few, some blocks. So we are just going to roll very organically. Do you want to tell us more about yourself before we?
Yeah, so like
really
you mentioned,
roll?
I was in the military. I'm a world traveler. I was a 3-time soldier of the year during my time in the Army. I've been to about 23 different countries in my life. So I like to go experience different cultures. I know about 3 languages, learning the 4th. I like to do things pretty simple, play the piano, cook, meet different kinds of people, have those nice, lasting conversations that could really impact them on a different level, on a different spectrum. For work, I own a tax business, and I also manage my podcast. So I like to stay pretty busy, I guess you could say.
You're a busy guy. Are you still doing your college thing, your master's levels?
I am.
So you're adding that too.
I am. That, like, the dish is so big sometimes that I'm like, I got to keep the list consistent, because sometimes I forget. Like, oh, wow, I got this thing going on as well.
Okay, cool. So listen, part of the Sebas perspective and the Lasting Conversations perspective, I always go to the human aspect and community and why we are all really here from a heart space. And I get the sense this is what you really are here for as well. You tap into politics, you tap into what's happening in the world and what people are saying. So where are we going? How can we as people remember that human aspect? And I'm saying that because right now there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of pieces of news and whatever news outlets are saying and trying to keep people afraid. And I think you and I come from a place of we don't have to be afraid, and yet change is here to happen. Change is here to happen, and we remember the human space. So let's go.
So I would say that the biggest thing that I think is holding a lot of people back is the lack of vulnerability that people want to show nowadays with a lot of things, right? People don't want to be vulnerable because they don't want to be hurt. There's this big stigma that says if you're vulnerable, you're weak. And that applies to every gender and different sides of social economic ladders. So I think that the first step from a humanity standpoint to fixing a lot of the issues that we have today is not being afraid to be vulnerable with other people, not being afraid to show who you really are, what you really believe, and why you believe it. More importantly, it's not just enough to say, I believe in this. You have to explain why, because if you don't, no one's going to be able to understand it, right? No one's going to be able to have any sort of empathy for what you're saying and what you're feeling. So I think that if you could establish vulnerability and be open and authentic with how you are and who you are, I think that's the first step to changing a lot of things.
I think you're very, very true on that. And with people who are in a business world, a political world, or whatever it is that they're doing, there is a lot of internal fear of speaking out. I'm not sure social media is really helping in some ways. Some ways it really is, because people are saying some really, really great things. And that's helpful to know, oh, okay, I too can feel this way. And that's safe for me to feel this way. On the flip side can be just the vitriol. So what is your perspective on all of that part of it?
My perspective is that today we hold people to be a perfect standard, right? We want
Too perfect.
We want everyone to be perfect without realizing that good people are often complicated people. Right. Same thing with bad people. You look at any sort of historical figure, any big leader, any powerful leader in any country around the world, they were not perfect individuals. They were very complicated. They had a lot of issues with themselves. They had a lot of controversy if we hold them to today's standards. So I think it's accepting the fact that not every single person is perfect. It doesn't matter what kind of fame or what pedestal we put them on. Right. They have issues just like everyone else has issues. And I guarantee you, if we were to take anyone that was on the street, anyone that's listening to this podcast or listens to my own, and we were to look at every single aspect of their life, at some point they've made mistakes. At some point, people have done things that they're not proud of. So I think that if we stop holding individuals to this perfect idealistic standard that's just practically unachievable, I think that we can get real authenticity from leaders, from business individuals, from individuals in positions of power, and all forms of institution and human endeavor to give people what they really need and what they really desire.
So in one way, as you were speaking, I was thinking, how often do people within these powerful positions just come out and say, I've been having a crap day, or this is a really shitty thing that's going on right now, and I'm really sorry, or I don't know what to do. Ooh, how about that, being that vulnerable? I don't know.
Yep. That's next level. That's next level.
Wouldn't that be next level?
It would be.
Like, I don't know. We could all use your help. Ooh, what would that be like?
I think that would be like, initially, there'd probably be a lot of uncertainty. Like,
right. What do you mean you don't know?
What do you mean you don't know?
If you don't know, wait a second, right?
Yeah, you're supposed to know.
You're supposed to know.
But I think the best approach to that is, hey, I don't know, but I'm figuring it out. Right.
That's right.
I don't know, but I'm finding us a way. I'm finding us a path forward.
Right.
I don't have all the answers right now, but I will get them. Right. That's a lot different than simply saying, I don't know, and holding your hands together, putting them on your lap.
Or not saying anything.
We're not saying anything at all. And just acting like nothing's going on.
Well, there's that too.
Yep. Acting like there's nothing going on. Everything is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, and that's where human beings get lost. They get lost in the shuffle and they get set aside. And so I think your last show that dropped this week had to do with the Native Americans, and that is historic in historic proportions. And so those types of conversations as well, and from around the world, it's a very interesting time. It's really a time of awakening for people to speak out, to say, this just doesn't feel right, whether it's somebody in their workplace, they go, I have to move on, or somebody in their household, or even an entire society saying that's enough. That's enough, and we're here and we matter. What are you thinking about that?
I think that,
and again, from a global perspective, because I know you are a global dude, and so your purview, your vista is very large.
Oh yeah. I'm very big on world history.
Right.
Like, I've really immersed myself in learning as much as I can about every country on the planet.
Right.
Whether it's from their culture aspect, their government, their society, their economics, whatever it might be. I'm very intrigued into seeing the differences, yet similarities, that we have all across the planet. From a global perspective, I think that oftentimes people say things in the moment, but then forget about what they said and go forward. Specifically, leaders, right? Country leaders, NGOs, organizations that, say, hey, we need to help this group of people. And they say it for the clickbaits. They say it for the quick little snippets on Instagram or on YouTube or on the news. But then you never hear anything about it anymore. I still remember a couple of years ago, for a whole month, a lot of NGOs were saying, hey, we need to go help the Australians because their forests are burning.
Oh, the forest fires, right.
The forest fires in Australia. That was all for a month. And then it disappeared. I never heard anything else about the koalas that were burning up, anything else about all the animals that were apparently being burned up and tossed up. Because a lot of the times, what I see happening is that people just try to attack sentiments of the mass population without really engaging the actual issue, without finding the root cause. A lot of virtual signaling, essentially. They want to make it seem that they care, but they really don't care, right? And I think unless all the world, all the population of, like, let's say a community, a country, a city, etc., if they don't care, no one else is going to care, right? Because change can happen from the top to the bottom, but change can also happen from the bottom to the top, right? That's how historically revolutions happen.
That's exactly it. It's literally from the grass up.
From the grass up. Yep. Right? It was a couple individuals that came together and said, we need to change things.
Right.
So I think that unless populations in any country, right? Because this applies really to any single country, because every country has a minority group in it. Every single one. There isn't a single one that doesn't. There's always a group that feels more neglected than other groups by the government or by society or by any institution. So I think that unless the society as a whole decides to say, hey, let's not forget about these people, nothing's going to change.
And that can start within your own street or your own block.
Absolutely.
Your city, your town, let alone countrywide, or your own household, really, right? Because sometimes some of the households are feeling lost, or the kids get lost in the shuffle, and we could rabbit hole the whole thing, as a matter of fact. So, just the other day, within a 48-hour span, I had conversations with a teacher who is trying to place a family who had come here from the Ukraine, from that emergency situation, and to find some sponsorship for education. At the same time, there was a couple who fled Russia and left everything behind. And they don't have anything. And these are two different families from two very different and yet literally the same perspective of, I'm afraid, we're not safe. It's insane what's happening in both of our countries. But they've landed right here in Florida, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. But this is perhaps what makes I want to say the United States, but is the world go around. You know, that human aspect is still welcoming to whatever political hoo-ha is happening in danger zones and such. So what are your thoughts on that? Because it was very striking to me that these are people. I'm a people person. I'm team human. I just am. And it doesn't matter which side. I will just say, we're not meant to be killing each other. We're not meant to be killing each other. And that was brought to my forefront this week of there are children and there are people that just want to live their life. And what their leaders independently, for whatever all the reasons are choosing to want to, perpetuate violence and fear. Mm-hmm. So that's been part of my week. How are you feeling about that? And you come from a military background.
I do.
So I really will appreciate your come from.
Absolutely. So the way I see it, there's no winners in war. Right. People often forget about that. People like to say that in war, there's the victor and the loser, and it's that cut and dry. It's not like that, right? Like that. There's casualties on both sides in any war, right? There's innocent people on both sides in any war, and there's evil people on both sides in any war. Yep. Right. It's not just as clear cut, all glory as people like to make it out to be, as the movies make it out to be. Right. So when you take these two families, for example, you got one family that's Ukrainian, one family that's Russian. They're both escaping the same conflict. Mm-hmm. Likely, people would have a lot more sympathy for the Ukrainians instead of the Russians, even though they're both escaping the same situation. Right. They're both just trying to get away and make the best decisions for their family possible. Mm-hmm. From a military background, I do understand the massive importance of being able to defend yourself, mm-hmm. right? Of being able to defend your own sovereignty of what's yours. Of course. Right? We're seeing that actively with that war situation that you're talking about mm-hmm. in Eastern Europe. Right. Being able to protect your citizens, being able to protect your family, etc. Right. Because not everyone is a good person, right? Like we said, there's good people and there's bad people on both sides of any single spectrum. Mm-hmm. So I think that there is a certain degree of protection that you must hold without obviously overdoing it. Right. And what do I mean by overdoing it? I mean, we could look at all of human history, and through all of human history, there's been invasion, there's been pillaging, there's been rape, there's been assassination, there's been crimes against humanity that have occurred from every single nation. There isn't a single nation that you could point on a map that says they're clean.
That's right.
Not a single one. I know a lot of people like to obviously say from a historical standpoint, hey, Europeans, right, came to the US, killed a lot of Native Americans, or Europeans came to Africa, or anything else. Or you could even take even further back to, let's say, Jews taking over and fighting Palestinians, etc. We could find any single group. Every time. Right? Every single time, those are the obvious ones. With
cultures within their cultures, in the jungles and everywhere.
But if you look deeper in history, you'll find out that, like, for example, Native American tribes would fight themselves. They would go to war with themselves, right? African tribes would go to war with themselves, right? Europeans would go to war with themselves throughout countless countries, decades, centuries. So you look at any country on this planet, there's always been black spots. Right? There's always been situations that those countries wouldn't be proud of today. And in between those black spots, there's innocent people, mm-hmm. right? They just want to live their life. They don't want to deal with what their leaders or their politicians or anyone else that makes decisions for them is doing. They just want to be able to go home, take care of their kids, take care of their family, make a living, and be happy. They don't want to complicate it. They don't want to be involved with all the other decisions that are being made at a strategic or geopolitical level. Mm-hmm. So I think that if most people had consideration for that, instead of just judging someone based off their nationality or saying, hey, this person likely has this or this person likely doesn't have that, just based on stereotypes, And I think it would be a lot easier for people to integrate and not feel so judged of coming to like a new country, let's say immigrating to the United States. I remember when I was in England, for example, I had a gentleman who was from Senegal, and we were talking, right? He was my Uber driver, and we were talking and we were discussing stuff because it was a long ride. And he said, hey, is it safe to come to the United States? Because I'm always seeing news about guns. I'm always seeing news about shootings, right? And I'm scared. Right? He was honest with me. He said, I'm scared. And I said, listen, you don't have to be scared, right? Because just because certain people, certain organizations like to paint a certain narrative about things doesn't mean it's necessarily true, right? Always do your own research. Always trust your own eyes. Because if you can't even trust your own eyes, you can't trust anything.
That is wise and very, very true. And again, that gets into perspective. Why I love the title of your whole show is called From a Perspective, because we can have all kinds of perspectives from our own come from. If you're kind of an afraid person, you're going to see the world from afraid lenses. And then if you're not, you will then have that opportunity to widen your scope and perhaps be more adventurous. And also who you're listening to. So if you're listening to other afraid people, and yes, that can include news organizations and things like that, then that is an embedded perspective. And we could name all kinds of different countries. Like I could have said, oh, Senegal, well, that's dangerous too. Well, hold on. But from whose perspective?
Exactly.
Why would I even have that in my brainstem?
Without a doubt. Right. I think most people don't realize that a lot of the thoughts that they hold have been programmed into their mind.
Right.
We're all programmed as kids. Right. When we come into the world, we don't come into the world already knowing that we're going to have a Harvard degree of knowledge. Right. We don't. Right. We come into the world and we learn based on our environment, based on our parents, based on our friends, our schooling, right? Our education, anything that is within our environment, we learn from that. Right. That's where we get our perspective. And someone programs things into our mind that stick with us for most of our life. Right. And that obviously varies between culture, country, place that you're in. But I think a lot of the times we don't even question why we think the things that we do. Right. Again, if you were to ask the average American, for example, how would they feel about going to Afghanistan? They would say, Afghanistan is horrible. It's disgusting, Taliban, etc. But if they look at what Afghanistan was in the 1970s, right, before the invasion of the Soviets, they would see that Afghanistan was a beautiful country. It had ski resorts. It had a growing population. It had a population of people that just, again, wanted to live their ordinary life. If you look at countries like Lebanon, right, Beirut used to be called the Paris of the Middle East, right? It used to be called the Paris of the Middle East. And now you look at Beirut today, it's a war zone, right? So if you look at countries through a certain lens all the time, you're going to have a certain idea or a certain perspective of what that country is. But if you broaden that, like you said, if you look at it from different angles, you're going to see the whole complete and holistic picture.
I love it. Do you foresee a Beirut or an Afghanistan or any of these other places that right now are in a situation? Do you see that turning back around? Like, where do you, like, you are, I know, I just get the feeling you are part of our future, right? You have a plan. You are a man of honor and great wisdom. And I'm very excited that our collective future is very bright. So where do you see, from your perspective already, that things can and will be turning around?
I think there's
or not. I mean, I don't want to put even what words in your mouth.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I think there's a lot of countries that have a lot of crazy potential for the future, right? Let's look at the country of India. Right? In the past 30 years, the country of India has taken a significant percentage of their population out of poverty. They've given a massive percentage of their population access to electricity, access to water, clean water, drinking water. They've completely changed how the country is functioning. And right now, India is one of the most rapidly advancing countries. If we look at it from the span of where it was 50 years ago to today, the technological advances, the roles that people are having in society, the progression that's being made there. I'm not even just talking about on a social aspect, but again, on an economic aspect,
right,
on a global aspect of the impact that they're having. I think that there's a lot of countries that have massive potential, just like India. Other countries that I could see being very prominent in the future is countries like Morocco. Right? The country of Morocco has something that a lot of people don't know that they have, which is they have the ability, they have a certain mineral in the ground that helps us massively with producing food, right? So if they can master that, if they can control that, they could be very prominent players in the future, right? It's very interesting because if you look at a lot of countries like Japan and Switzerland have virtually no natural resources. Yet they have a significantly higher standard of living than countries like Venezuela and Uruguay, who have massive deposits of natural resources.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to how they use it, right? And what decisions are made that could significantly impact the course of history of that nation and also the course of the history of its population. So there's many countries that can be very prominent in the future. And I also think there's a lot of countries that are not going to be so prominent in the future. Specifically, a lot of countries in Western Europe. Because a lot of countries in Western Europe are slowly starting to regress in what made them good countries in the first place, right? And that simple regression can be pointed down to one simple thing, which is what I said earlier, virtue signaling.
What's that term?
Virtue signaling.
Ooh, school us on that. What is virtue signaling?
Virtue signaling is essentially signaling that you care about something when you really don't.
Oh.
Right? It's just showing.
It's like clickbait or...
Yep, exactly.
It's fake. It's fake news. Yeah.
There's a lot of politicians.
Virtue signaling.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a lot of politicians and a lot of leaders and a lot of, I won't even say, I'll say this, bureaucrats. There's a lot of bureaucrats in Western Europe that are making a lot of decisions simply because they think it'll please the population.
Because it sounds good.
Because it sounds nice, without actually thinking about the second, third, and fourth order effects of decision making. We see that currently right now in Holland, for example, with farming, and how the government of Holland and the Netherlands has placed restrictions on how much food farmers can produce based on how much fertilizer they use, because they want to control the nitrogen levels of how much is being exposed to the world, without taking into consideration, okay, if we're closing down farms, if we're taking farmlands away from farmers, how are we going to eat? Who's going to produce the food? Yeah, we're taking care of the environment, and that's all good, as we should, right? Because we should take care of our planet. But then how is the population going to eat? It might not affect Western Europe right now, but what about all the countries that the Netherlands is exporting food to?
Right.
What about their populations? What about those people that can't get access to food that you might not even know about, that you won't even hear about, that are outside of Western Europe? Decisions like that are things that I look at and I point to and say, okay, if it continues on that trend, it could be very detrimental in the future. It might not be the burning of the castle today. It might not even be a year from now, but eventually it will be.
Well, do you see that there is kind of a shift? Because we all go through these evolutionary cycles and these evolutionary shifts. And so if that's part of the process, while I think the second piece of where my question is going to go has to do with more transparency, perhaps less border, perhaps a different way of governance across all the countries and the continents. If do you foresee that even, with my grandkids' time would be way more, that word that just keeps coming up is transparent, where it's an ease of use. It's a much more global partnership. And this is how we're doing inter-business together and living and educating, and that there are a whole different kind of passport. It's only to say, hey, thanks for being here. You're here, and now you're going to move on to the next thing, versus having it so restricted. Well,
I think all that really comes down to the business decisions that are made, right? Because there's this term.
Well, these power play positions, instead of having it as a power play and greed and hunger for money and power, but isn't there a different way? It feels like a different way is coming, because your generation and younger, we're not having it anymore. Right.
There absolutely is a different way. And I think that the way of going forward is of people actually believing in the people that govern them, like actually trusting them, actually saying, you know what, this is the right individual. They're doing the right job, right? They might not make the perfect decisions all the time, because again, like we said, even good people are complicated people.
Right.
Even good people can have a little bit of bad in them, right? Everyone does. But just because they do does not mean that they don't want the best for people that they govern. And that is the point where things start to change. The moment that people truly trust their leaders. And we're seeing that right now in a country like El Salvador, right? People love the president of El Salvador, right? And I speak multiple languages, so I listen to the broadcasts. I read the comments of what people say about this individual, about President Bukele. 92% approval rating across the entire nation. Right?
That's huge.
That's massive.
That's massive.
Imagine you had a United States president that had 92% approval.
Right.
When have you ever seen that?
Right.
When have you ever seen a president that could unite a nation like that?
Truly. And not for that virtual clickbaity thing that you were just saying.
But truly uniting a nation. Truly. People coming together and saying, you know what? We might have differences here and there. We might have a rough history. We might have gone through a civil war. We might have experienced hardship. But we're all together in this.
We're all in this together.
And we could all follow this individual, or we could be with each other and look forward to what's coming in the future for us. Look forward to what's coming for the kids. Because again, most people, 85%, 90% of the population, that's what they want. Right? They don't want to go and worry about how are you going to feed an entire country today. They don't want to go worry about what people are plotting against us. They just want to go sit down, spend time with the family, eat a nice dinner, talk about what the kids did at school today, and that's it. And go to work, enjoy their livelihood, and they want their biggest problem essentially to be, how am I going to fix the roof? Right? How am I going to change my tire? Right? That's what they want their problems to be. They don't want their problems to be, hey, I can't even walk outside at night or else I'm going to get robbed. I'm going to get stabbed. Or I might have to deal with a certain situation where I have to choose between the life of my friend or my daughter. Like some people in the world have to experience today due to the instability that they experience on a day-to-day basis. So when people can trust their leaders, and the leaders, this is very key here, the leaders don't allow for third-party groups or third-party individuals that are behind the shadows to make decisions. That is when change truly starts coming. In the United States, we have this thing called interest groups, which I like to call legal corruption, which is essentially groups of businesses that have a common interest, and they come together and they influence legislation. They influence policy, right? The moment that we have leaders who say no more, only people who are elected by the people, who are chosen by the people to lead, will make the decisions, not people who have been in power, who have been behind the shadows for decades, saying this is what's going to happen, and people follow that. That's when the real change is going to start happening.
Well, I keep calling that business unusual. And this piece that you're just talking about could take a long time. Now, PIECE, that piece, but immediately comes, there's peace, PEACE. Peace is here and will come because it is it's a different generational cycle, and we're cycling out these old ways of doing business, of having politics, of running your family. Everything is becoming, dare I say, heart-centered, but it's coming from that human aspect. I see you as another human, whether it's an employee, jobs still get done. Tasks at hand are very important. So it's not all flippity-floppity, wishy-washy. It's still very precise. And yet everything that you were just saying, if the goal is to remember that there are humans involved, like what is our product? I heard another school administrator be very worried that their funders, their administrators, the new CEO comes in and has forgotten it's about the kids and the students. They're bottom lining it. It's about numbers and figures, which completely offsets, which affects how they hire teachers and put their teams in place. You want to have that leader say, even if you have that moment of, okay, here's a scenario, I'm not sure what to do, but I am trusting in myself to establish a team who has your back, has my back, and has a common goal.
Yeah, there's always the team, agenda coming in.
Well, that's just it. And so if the agenda, which has morphed away from who are our real clients, if it's about money, that's not a client. If it's about a kid learning, and then you're going to have your team of teachers be that instills the trust. It's a beautiful cycle. I want to say vicious cycle. We're used to saying vicious cycle.
Yes,
I get to verbalize that. It's a different cycle, so that we get to cycle away from this sort of in whose pocket way of business and tearing somebody down. Like, I want to do business my way and I want my commission and screw everybody else who doesn't, right? We don't have to do that anymore. We just don't. And so again, generationally, the rest will just move on and not be here, literally, not even here, because the rise is coming from that grassroots of a younger generation. And those of us who are older too, that are just saying, yeah, no, there is a different way of looking at things. And I'm not here to say any one is best and better than. I kind of vote Team Purple. It's there, like you're saying, there's many sides to the same thing, but as long as we can keep forward in the common goal of understanding you're human and you put your pants on the same way that I do. It's as simple as that. Right.
I think that idea of humanity gets lost significantly through things like money, right? Or things like power, more importantly, because money gives access to power, right? Money is just a byproduct. Everyone always talks about money being the root of all evil. That's a common.
But it's not.
But
really.
it's not.
Yeah,
it's not.
That doesn't help any of us either.
I don't. Because you need money to survive.
Right.
Right. Like, you can't just go into a store. I'm taking this cake. You like it or not, I'm leaving. Right. You have to pay for it.
Right.
I think that what money truly does is that it shows who an individual was the whole time. If you were a bad person before you had money, you're going to be a bad person after you get the money. If you're a good person before you got the money, you're going to be a good person after you get the money. I don't believe that money corrupts people. I think that money just shows you who you've always truly been deep down inside. And when people, like you said, are more focused about their return on investment, their ROI, instead of ensuring that they got good teachers to teach the kids, the next generation, that just shows you where their mindset has always been. It's never been about the kids. It's never been about educating.
Right.
It's just been about, how can I make more money and put in the bank account?
Right.
How can I satisfy my investors?
Right.
How can I satisfy my business partners? It's very selfish, right? It's very self-oriented because it's all about me, right? That's the culture that we live in today. What can I feel? What can I experience? What can I do? Not what anyone else can do, right? It doesn't matter that I have $10 million in my bank account right now, because I could go buy myself a Lamborghini. I could go buy myself a nice watch, the most expensive clothes from the Versace store in Miami. I could buy myself this nice luxurious apartment. It's never like, okay, I got these $10 million. I could probably keep like $2 million for myself, $3 million for myself. I could use that, take care of my family, do my thing. This other $7 million, how many people can I help with this $7 million? It's not about giving it to the government or just donating to a charity, but you yourself, how much can you impact and how many people can you impact with those 7 million? What if you go to a country, again, I think we spoke about this on the last episode that we did together on my podcast. You should check it out if you're listening, by the way.
That's right.
What if you had money, $1, and you went to a country where $1 is worth like 5,000 of their dollars, right? $900 could be their whole 2-month salary right there. How many people could you change like that? How many families could you impact? What kind of a holistic impact do you have on a society or on a global aspect that we've been talking about this whole time? If you took a step back and said, it's not just all about me, right? Once I could take care of my family, we're good, right? Anything after that, anything else after the basic necessity to take care of my people, what can I do for other people who might not be my people, but are still humans? There's still other people that cry, that are happy, that want similar things that I want. We might not be the same race, same gender, same nationality, same ethnicity, but that doesn't matter, right? All that is just white noise to keep people divided, to keep people separated and saying, I'm better than you because of XYZ, or all of this group is bad, or all of this group is good. And again, like we spoke about with the example of war, like we spoke about with the example of history, there's always good and bad people on both sides, right? There's good aspects of this individual, and there could also be horrible aspects of this individual, right? This perfection standard is unobtainable. So once we start, again, pulling back from that self-centric mindset and start thinking about it as, okay, a community, right? Other people. Imagine if everyone did that for a day, just one day. Imagine if everyone for one day in the United States, for example, said, I'm going to do something to help somebody out. 300 plus million people, every single one of them said, I'm going to do something to help someone else out today. What would that day look like? I guess we'll never know right now.
But we could. But we could. And it can be as simple as a smile. It can be as simple as a thank you. Don't forget to tip your waiter, show up.
It could be as simple as...
It's so simple, or it can be a very grand gesture, but it's something that's from outside of ourselves. And because even if we're having a crappy day, but within that too, sometimes we have to receive it and understand that that's part of this also, is to receive somebody smiling at you. Even if you're having a bad day, they're trying to show you a little something, and that's okay. But you see what I mean? It's that kind of ripple effect can be so simple, because I think there's a lot of us that, and I've heard people talk about the whole save the world thing. I'm going to save the planet. I'm going to save this and all these animals, but they're not, because, first of all, the animals are okay. We can do our best to steward them, but where do we lose sight again about a simpler act as that potential, as the real ripple effect, that groundswell starts from within and starts from our own home and starts from our own places, really. And then all of that reach out, because each one reach one. And it is a global thing. It really is. You write a letter to somebody in Africa, and there's just the opportunities are endless.
It is. It's vast. It's honestly impossible to calculate how many ways you could help somebody, on such a grand and massive scale. But people think that, again, there has to be with money. You just mentioned the example of, hey, I'm going to go save all of the continent of Africa and all the animals there. Okay. How about you think a little bit smaller starting out, right? Because it takes time to get there, right? It's a ladder that you have to climb, right? And sometimes that ladder could have steps that are missing, right? Sometimes you got to take 2 steps back to get to the step forward, right? So how about you take 1 step back and say, okay, what can I do now? This is my vision for the future. What can I do now? What animals can I help now if we really want to focus on the animal example? What people can we help out now?
Right.
Because we're also animals, biologically, right?
That's
we're
right.
mammals.
That's right.
We're mammals. We're also animals. The only difference is that we can do certain things that other animals can't, but other animals can do things that we can't.
That's right.
And it's that simple. So
that's a whole nother show, by the way. So keep on going.
That is a whole nother show,
by the way.
That is a complete. There's some people that say some things, and I'm like, wait a second, take a step back.
That's a whole nother show.
But the simple idea of, hey, one simple act today could be someone's determining factor for tomorrow,
right,
is something that's applicable every single day, everyone's life, regardless of where they are.
Sebas, this has been just a beautiful, fruitful conversation. And I usually like to kind of swing over to the fun part. And, you are kind of an intense dude, but I sense you've got the fun swag.
Oh,
where's your hair is all flaming blonde right now. And you just like to zhuzh it up. So within, not just yourself, but within the context of what we're talking about, life doesn't have to be so heavy and scary. I think that's really the whole point. And so again, from your perspective, where's the fun and the hope and the joy?
I think the joy really comes from doing things that fulfill you, right? Actual fulfillment. For me, my personal fulfillment comes from helping people out, right? From showing people things that they haven't seen before, right? For example, I had cousins that came from Colombia, right? From Bogota here.
And that's where you're originally from?
I'm originally from Miami.
Okay.
But my whole family, my whole lineage is from Colombia.
Okay.
Right? So I'm a first generation American here.
Got it.
But they came, right? And in Bogota, it's a city in the mountains, right? So that's all I know. They know mountains, they know maybe a little bit of the jungle because of the Amazons in Colombia, but they don't really know what it's like here, right? Beach, palm trees, that tropical vibrance. So I showed them that, right? I said, I don't have to do anything flashy. I'll just have them come in the car and we'll drive down this road that we have here in Florida called A1A, right? We'll put the windows down and I'll let them be able to experience what it's like to be in that little Hollywood movie, right? That they've seen dozens of times.
Right. Put the top down.
And something as simple as that, right, brought them so much joy. And in turn, it brought me a lot of joy. Things that are also fulfillment for me, right, is being able to know that I'm moving forward somewhere. I'm moving in a direction, right? I have momentum with me. I'm a firm believer that if you don't have momentum built into something, it's very difficult to get out of wherever you want to get out of and go wherever you want to go. If you look at a rocket ship, for example, you don't ever see NASA launching a rocket into space and it's taking off, it's going thousands of miles an hour into the sky, and then it stops midway trying to break the atmosphere, and then it keeps going. No, right? If that rocket doesn't have any momentum, it's going to come down, crashing back on the planet. It won't break the atmosphere, right? Same way with anyone else in life. If you're in a place that you don't like, if you want to go somewhere, whether it's to become a doctor, it's to open up your own restaurant, it's to pass your class at college, it's to get that relationship that you always wanted with a specific individual. If you're not building momentum towards that direction, you're never going to get there, right? Constantly knowing that you're going forward and you're going in the direction. And the only real way to do that is by staying consistent with anything that you want to do, right? Maybe you did 5% today. Okay, you got 5% closer to the goal. Add 5% by 6 months every single day. Every single day you get 5% closer. 6 months down the road, where are you? People don't think about things like that. For me, I'm always aiming to be 10% better than what I was yesterday, right? My 10% can simply be, hey, I got to do this certain task in a faster time frame. Other people's 10% is simply just getting off the couch, right? Everyone's got a different kind of 10%. But as long as you're making those small gains every day towards getting to that goal, you're going to get somewhere.
I think that's a great place to finish up. Unless, do you have any more nuggets from your Sebas perspective?
Well, all I'll say is this about the Sebas perspective. If you want to come and listen to some conversations like this, right, where we talk about some heavy topics, right, topics that most people don't want to touch, topics that some people are even afraid of discussing because society has told them not to, or because they're afraid of that their opinion might offend other people, or their opinion just simply isn't good enough. I think if you come to the Sebas perspective, you're going to come to the right place, because that's what we're all about. We're about experiencing life by me sharing my perspective, but also other people coming on and sharing theirs. Sometimes it might be the same, sometimes it might differ, but that's the beauty about it. It's the beauty of getting that holistic view in anything that we look at. So I think that's the perfect place and perfect summary for the Sebas perspective. Anyone who's interested, listen to a nice little Colombian guy talk about some crazy things, come to the right spot.
It is the right spot. And because you get into the things in the politics and stuff, but the fresh perspective is that it comes from your heart.
Absolutely.
You're not there to just ram anything down somebody else's throat.
Nope.
There's plenty of other shows for that. Your perspective is part of the human perspective, and that's what makes your show great, and why you and I just get along great.
Absolutely, 100%.
And so until next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, and thank you for listening. Please be sure to like, follow, review, and share this podcast. And if you'd like to be part of the conversation, send emails to podcasts@lastingconversations.com and follow us on Facebook. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.